Hey everyone, it is Monday. Welcome to another episode of Mindset Monday. It's great to be with you. I'm Dr. Trevor. I'm really excited about today's topic. So today's episode I've titled Collaboration Beats Competition. It's the idea of shifting our mindset from, I think, so many of us who have this competitive spirit to us, and I'm going to explain a little bit why that's the case, to a more collaborative experience. And so, first of all, let me just share a little bit about what's the difference between competition and collaboration. So competition emphasizes the individual success. It emphasizes comparison, this kind of scarcity mindset, which I'll talk about a little bit, and stress. So differently than collaboration. Collaboration focuses on shared goals, mutual support, collective achievement, and abundance. I want to go back for a second, this idea of what's called the scarcity mindset in competition and this kind of abundance mindset in collaboration. So the scarcity mindset is simply this idea of there's like finite number of items or in this case, if we're talking about competition and the idea of success, there are finite opportunities for success or methods to success or the path to success, or there's a pinnacle of when we reach success. And so scarcity says the more and more we work towards this, the fewer and fewer it becomes. It narrows down this idea of becomes more scarce. And so in this idea of competition, it's this idea of like king of the hill, of like who's going to get to the top first, who's going to arrive, who's going to achieve. And it's simply this idea that there's only room for one at the top. So think about that like a mountain at the base of the mountain, right? It's really, really wide. So think about it in the context of competition, right? There's lots of opportunities and there's lots of resources and there's lots of activity and work going on at the base of this mountain. But the further up you go in this mountain, right, you might get some checkpoints and some base camps, and the further you go, there's fewer and fewer opportunities. There's fewer and fewer people that can kind of achieve and arrive into those higher places. And little by little, right, this mountain of this scarcity mindset, it becomes narrower and narrower and narrower and narrower. And the ability to get further on this journey is only available to fewer people with fewer resources and fewer opportunities. And you got to have the right sort of things in order to be able to take those right steps in order to be able to get up this path to, again, this pinnacle kind of idea in competition. Like I win, right? Like I'm the winner. I'm the one. Okay, very different than this idea of collaboration and the idea of like an abundant mindset, which is something more along this maybe different visual. Is maybe think of it like a climbing wall. Where actually the same number of people at the base and the same width at the base, right, as it might be at the top. Right, different than the mountain where it gets narrower and narrower and narrower and narrower. And the same. The climbing wall, the same opportunities for people to grab certain spots on the wall, right, to pull themselves up or plant their foot in the next space. Right, little by little, right, people can kind of navigate and move through to this, to the higher places on this wall. But here's what's kind of outside of the kind of analogies or the visuals of this, if it's a mountain or if it's a climbing wall. By the way, in the climbing wall, one of the things I love about a climbing wall is if you do it safely, right, you have a harness. Right? That harness is attached to a rope, and there's actually somebody at the other end of that rope. That other person at the end of the rope, or maybe somebody else at the base of the mountain, might also be there, or at the base of the climbing wall, might also be there to be able, with perspective, to be able to say something like, hey, look up to your right, and they're able to see the next handhold and pull themselves up, or might be able to say, hey, if you can just get a little bit further, maybe you can make it over to this side because you can maybe be a little bit more stable and maybe the path is a little bit easier, right? So you've got somebody holding the rope for you. You've got somebody at the base, right, with perspective being able to help you navigate as you move through this. Now, every analogy kind of falls short at some point, and this one's no different. But the idea in the abundance mindset, something like the idea of like, hey, there's room for everyone. There's opportunity for everyone. And we don't have to climb over each other or try to pull away or distance ourselves in some kind of isolated way, right? That we're better or that we can do more. In fact, what we actually find in the abundance mindset is we actually accomplish more when we work together. And that's the premise of this idea of collaboration beats competition. So let me talk to you just about a little bit of the clinical insight. So maybe not surprising, but research shows that competition triggers chronic stress, leads to anxiety. For many people, if they stay at it long enough, the experience of burnout, this constant like grind it out, competitive, I've got to do it all by myself, I've got to get ahead, I've got to stand out, right? More stress, more anxiety, and more burnout. Whereas the collaborative work, it stimulates something totally different in us. And we have a very different experience. So it stimulates positive social connections. It actually reduces stress. And this is cool. We find it actually enhances our overall mental health experience. Right, when we can actually do the work together. So give me a couple examples of this. I mean, there's some incredible successful teams over the years that were not built by one person. We might identify a person, the person who started the company, or the person who was maybe the spokesperson for the company, or whatever it might be. But the reality is some of these companies that we trust and we use their products every day are companies built on collaboration. Now, I think for some of you, before you found us in the app, and that's how you're watching it, right? So you pulled out your phone. The company's behind your phone. When we think about these big companies, like first of all, many of us have an iPhone, right? So Apple, if you go back and read their story, and we know this as part of the kind of the myth of their story, that it was started in a garage, and it was started with a small team, right? Which is now this massively successful international brand and like influence in the entire world. It started with this little team. It didn't start with one person. It started with a team. And today is an incredibly massive team of collaborators that work around the clock, day in and day out. Some of you pulled out your laptop, or you opened a web browser. Many of you found today's episode through Google. Google's another one of those companies. Like, they are known, like significantly known, for fostering collaborative connections in their culture. In fact, I had the privilege one time. I used to live in Northern California, and I remember driving through Silicon Valley and knew somebody who worked at Google, and I remember having the chance to go onto Google's campus in California, and actually walking through some of their office space. And I remember, like, this was probably 20 years ago. And I remember they were like kind of on the cutting edge of what they called, at the time, they called them work pods. And it was this idea of, rather than having a bunch of cubicles and a bunch of corner offices with closed doors, they created these what are now often called collaborative spaces for teams. So teams would come to work, and they might have a locker, or they might have a cubby or a desk somewhere just to keep their personal things. But most of their workday was spent in these pods or these collaborative workspaces, right, where people were not separated by walls, by cubicles. They were not separated by other physical barriers. But no, there's these open spaces that allowed them to collaborate at these large tables, or these living room areas where they could get more comfortable. Had these like little kitchenettes where they could be collaborative around a meal. These boardrooms, if they had them, they were usually glass, or maybe they were even just out in the open, where they were able to constantly be in communication with one another. I love that. And since then, that has kind of caught on. There's lots of companies that do that today. Okay, so I also want to share this example. I think that we can just find in our communities, which, think about it this way, these examples of effective collaboration that often happens in like these community-driven initiatives. So like food drives, support groups, these other examples where there's groups of people, right, that are coming together for a common good and a common goal. And what we see is, what the work that what an individual can do might be great, but there's something around the idea of synergy. And it's like just simply this idea of like 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, but like 1 + 1 equals 3 or 4 or 5. That's the principle of synergy, that the sum of its parts, like something is greater than the sum of its parts. That's this idea of collaboration. Okay, so I want you to just take a moment, some kind of, whether you do it now or maybe you do it later today, to do some like reflection around this idea of your personal experience. And ask yourself, like, when was a time when collaboration was used and it actually led to something better? There was something more significant about working alongside with another, contributing to some greater good than the work of your own. And it yielded something more, some better outcomes. This idea of what I talked about, synergy. Like maybe for you, you're like, hey, I just did that before lunch today. For others of you, it was last week, last month, last year. For some of you, it's been a long, long time. I think especially now when we find ourselves, many of us work remotely. We have kind of mobile or virtual workplaces and jobs. For many of us, we are specialists in our work. Like we're very, very good at what we do, but we just do our one thing. And maybe without even knowing it, we are contributing to something much bigger, and we are actually a part of a larger system. But I think because of the way our work is, or maybe even just other areas of our lives, we miss out on seeing it. We just get to see the one thing that we do day in and day out. So again, recall a time when collaboration rather than competition led to a significant, better outcome. And then maybe consider this question as you're thinking about this idea of collaboration beats competition, which is maybe just take inventory of what's your go-to strategy. Like, identify your current mindset. Is it a collaborative mindset or is it a competition mindset? And then consider how that might affect like your emotional, mental, and relational well-being. Let me just pause for a moment, because I think for a lot of people, we might categorize it in a way to be able to think like, oh, well, maybe it seems like extroverted people are the collaborative ones, and introverted people are the competitive ones. That might be true in some cases, but I think it's really helpful for us to not make that assumption that is the standard of the mindset that we hold, or the way that the tendency or the strategy we have about working to accomplish certain goals in our lives. It's not necessarily. In fact, what we know about extroverts and introverts is it's not so much do they like people, do they spend time with people, do they collaborate with people, do they rather be alone, would they rather be competitive or work by themselves? No, that's actually not it. Extroverts are individuals who are energized when they're around people. Introverts tend to be energized when they're around just a few people, or they're kind of refueled when they get to spend some quality time alone. But in either case, there is room to be collaborative in our mindset. Okay, so I want to talk about like if we don't just inherently have this collaborative mindset, or maybe even understand more what is that collaborative mindset. I just want to talk about some practical ways to shift in that direction. So here's a really simple example. maybe consider this. If you're at work, or maybe it's not work, maybe it's something in your community, maybe it's even within your family. One of the things we can shift towards something that's more collaborative is to be able to celebrate when other people succeed. When was the last time you did that? Like, somebody in your life succeeds, and you are able to, like, publicly and genuinely celebrate that with them. I think we have to actually consider in the midst of that, there's actually like a journey of thought and feeling that has to come before that. I know this happens for a lot of us. Like, maybe we see a coworker who gets an award, or they get a promotion, or we see something on social media, and a friend of ours, or at least an acquaintance of ours, has some kind of major success. Okay, so that's kind of like the situation or the stimuli. In the midst of it, I think it's important for us to help kind of pay attention before we get to this idea around this shift towards collaboration, is to be able to actually have to start within. Like, what's the thought and what's the feeling that's showing up when we're sitting in the office and somebody else gets acknowledged or rewarded? Some promotion comes and it's to somebody else. We see something on social media and there's success by someone else. And I think there's lots of ways our minds can wander in this, but categorically to consider, somebody with a more competitive mindset might instantly go to and then ultimately hold on to, well, why didn't I win that award? What could have I done to have gotten that acknowledgement from the boss? What do I gotta do to make sure that I get that level of success and I'm rewarded and I'm applauded? Okay, so there's this inherent thought journey and process of like, hey, I didn't get it. What do I gotta do to get it? And then that maybe often leads to feelings. Sometimes those feelings are feelings of jealousy. I think that's a pretty common experience. Somebody else gets acknowledged and gets an award. That makes me jealous. Why didn't I get it? I want it. I think associated with that jealousy, sometimes there's resentment. Sometimes there can be hard feelings, this idea of like, it feels like injustice almost, like I deserve it, I should have gotten it, they don't work as hard as I work, they don't know as much as I know, I've been here longer, I've been at this more. We start to compare. That's another part of that. And there's lots more, but if we just shift this idea of comparison to the idea of collaboration, somebody wins an award, and we can quickly go, oh man, that is awesome. I'm so excited for them. Like, that's great. And it's this shifting from scarcity to abundance to be able to say, man, there's lots of room for lots of opportunity, for lots of success, for lots of people. And my friend or my acquaintance, my coworker, like, good for them. Like, they put in the work, they got the acknowledgement. I'm genuinely and publicly excited for them. Right, so that's the thought. The feeling is, again, I'm happy, I'm excited, I'm proud of them. And then the behavior in that kind of sequence of thought, feeling, and behaviors, it plays out that way, right? Like, I congratulate them and I tell them, great job and you're awesome and keep up the good work. And, the things we also see in the midst of this is we can not only celebrate others' achievements genuinely and publicly, but another example of how we can shift this mindset towards collaboration is, like, what if we could approach our interactions with other people with curiosity, with openness? Like, what if we could view our colleagues, our coworkers, our friends, our peers, what if we could view them as allies rather than competitors? Right? What if we could see them as allies rather than competitors? What if we could, again, lean in with curiosity? It was like, wow, like, what worked for you? Like, how did that play out that it had these outcomes and these results? Like, again, I'm curious. I have openness, right, to hear and receive. I think one of the things in the midst of that we have to really kind of check somewhere is we have to check our pride. right? Just to check in with ourselves. We don't have all the answers. We don't have it all figured out. The methods and the modalities that we use might not be the only strategies out there. Right? So if we can maintain openness and curiosity and humility to be able to say, wow, that is awesome, and I want to learn from you. I want to learn with you. And I think there's a significant shift in us when we can do that. And then I'm going to give one more example of this idea of shifting towards collaboration that we could work on, we could focus on. So after we talked about celebrating others and we talked about approaching interactions with curiosity, the third one is just to be open to share resources, share credit, and share success stories. I think that's incredibly helpful. When we think about collaboration, think about this idea of like we are quick to share resources, and we are quick to give credit outside of ourselves but to others. And it's easy for us to talk about success stories, not our success story, but the success story of others, the success story of the team that we might be contributing to, the team that we might be collaborating with, but we're thinking about it in a different framework. So we're quick to be able to interact with others, and when they say, hey, I've been trying this and this isn't working, we can quickly say like, hey, I've been working on this too. I've been thinking about this for a long time, and here's what I have found. And then be able to, in the midst of that, to be able to be open to be, hey, I want to be a person who is collaborative, because not only do I want to listen to you and hear from you, but I want to start to be able to share with you. I want to learn from you, and I would love for you to learn from me. And we can start to, again, see this posturing that we are more towards allies and less like competitors. All right, so let me give you a few other things just before we wrap up in this episode. Here's a couple other examples in the midst of this that we might consider. I think about collaborative partnerships amongst brands. Have you ever seen brands that have like worked together? Like they may actually even come from completely different industries, but they start to actually innovate. Like they take the strength of maybe what one team is doing and the work of another team, and they're pairing them together, and they come up with something new, something stronger, something better. I think this happens a lot. These organizations, particularly in like anthropology, in this direction of kind of social change, where there might be these groups or these industry leaders from one area that come alongside another area, and they actually create together something new. Okay, another is like, you know, for myself and for our team here at LiveWell, like we're within the healthcare system, and I think healthcare is one of these industries that continues to work towards the idea of collaboration, even though it's a very, very competitive market. I think there's incredible opportunity for more collaboration within healthcare. So there's this idea of, hey, if the goal is to support the patient or the client or the customer, in whatever language you use, whatever industry you're in, if that's the goal, what if we could be more collaborative to enhance the patient or client, customer outcomes? So in healthcare, if we were to say, hey, what if we had data and what if we had research, right, that we could share with others, and then they could they could fuel their research, and then they would be able to share that, and that would do the same for others. And eventually it comes back to us, and we're starting to learn from what we have taught others who have taught others who have taught others who are now teaching us in, again, whatever niche of the work that we are a part of. Like a quick example of that, like I remember when I was doing my PhD and I had to do my thesis and I eventually get to my dissertation, and I remember in writing out my work, I had to come up with this exhaustive list of literature that was already in the direction of my work. And I remember when I did this was years ago, I remember coming up with an initial thought which was this thought of, after I did all of this exhaustive research and study of like all of these books and studies and articles and blogs and writings and facts and findings and everything about the direction of my work, I remember having this thought of like, why am I even doing this? Like, it clearly, from all of this that I've discovered and found, there's already so many people in this space, and there's already so many findings and insights, there's so much data. Like, why am I even bothering? And I remember in that moment having a competitive mindset, because I had this mindset that was scarcity, which is this idea of like, there's no room for me at the top. Like, it's too crowded. There's too much noise and too much activity, right, going on, right? The scarcity of like, how would I ever stand out? How would I ever accomplish or achieve or succeed, and compete, right? Compete with all of this other research out there. And then I remember sitting with my with the research professor, the one who was helping me and preparing me for my dissertation in my doctoral program. And he was like, Trevor, like, you got this all wrong. Like, this body of work has been going on for decades in this specific area. You are every bit a part of it. And that actually is an incredible gift. You get to contribute to this ongoing and growing work. Man, you get to collaborate. You get to contribute. Because think about it. After you complete your doctorate and you publish your dissertation and it's out there to the world, think about that. Just like you went and found other people's dissertations, you went and looked at other people's research, you actually learned and gleaned from all of the studies and all of the work that was out there, which helped guide your work and your study and your research. And now you get to be a part of that, and you get to help fuel the fire for people who will come later, a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 50 years from now. And all of a sudden I had this significant shift of this abundant mindset, this idea of collaborative, like, oh, I get it. Like, my eyes were open. I get to be a part of something so much more. All right, so as we kind of just, we recap and kind of like close it out for today. Again, this idea of collaboration beats competition. Even though many of us came up in a very, how would you call it, kind of rigid system, kind of taught us and told us there's only room for one at the top. There's a winner and there's a bunch of losers. We have these mantras like every man for himself or every woman for themselves, right? This idea is success is dependent on me, like me and me alone. It pushes against the mindset that we actually want to adapt, we want to hold on to, and we want to embrace, which is this idea of collaboration, this idea that there's room for more, there's room for this abundant type thinking, to be able to say, I get to be a part of something more than myself, something that's synergistic, that I get to contribute, and I'm going to be open-handed about all of it. I'm not going to grab and I'm not going to hold on to with my fists and hoard, but rather I'm going to be open-handed, right? Because there are those who came before me that I'm learning from. And then right here, right now, in the midst of that, my work, and whether that's in my job, serving my community, caring for my family, or beyond, I'm going to welcome this idea of joining with others, inviting them in, being a part of something collaborative where I can celebrate others, I can stay curious, I can share resources openly, and in the midst of that, recognize that there's strength in numbers. And it's more than just me. And success is not built by one person, but it is built by teams. All right, so my challenge to you this week is pay attention. Pay attention this week as you head in and you think about these collaborative opportunities where you can celebrate others, where you can stay curious, where you can be open-handed in your resources. You can shift your mindset to be able to say, hey, what about me? And it can go from a singular me to maybe a more collaborative we. And just to know that you get to be a part of something more. All right, so Wednesday, Dr. Mike's going to be with us for Wellness Wednesday. I'll be back to see you on Friday for